Hello and welcome back to the Showing Up to Your Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and I am really excited to be here with you today. I am excited, but it's like a weird kind of excitement. I actually want to share with you today a very sort of humbling story. That just from like current, like this is what's happening right now. Sometimes I tell you stories about my past, right? I tell you about how I used to be angry, or I tell you how I used to do this, or used to do that, right? But today I'm telling you about something that's happening like in this moment, like right now happening. And it's, kind of has been happening over the course of the last week. And so, well, first of all, as you know, I've been pumping this anger webinar that I did last night. I did it. It was okay, right? I did not love my performance. I didn't. I like the webinar itself. I like, the topics that I chose to cover. I like the layout of everything. Couple of stories I tried to tell went a little long for sure. So I'm giving myself the normal sort of critique that I would always give myself after a webinar like that. I remember when I first started doing the webinars, many of you found me through my webinar, How to Tame Stress and Eliminate Reactivity in Less Than 8 Weeks. I did that every Sunday night for over a year. Like literally, like I think it was something like 58 weeks or something like that, every single Sunday. And so after every single time I did it, I would spend a few minutes and I would go through, criticism, but as we call it, like, I used to take a lot of courses in writing. I had one point really wanted to be a professional writer, and it might still happen, but we'll see. I definitely have a book in me, that's for sure. And when you give, part of being in a writing group or writing class, is giving each other critiques of your work. It's one of the things. You got to present your work, and you got to have everybody else read it and like kind of tell you what they think of it. And they're very, in these sort of when it's peer review kind of thing, part of the education of that is to review in a certain positive way, right? Or not in a positive way, but in a certain way, right? And that way includes kind of sandwiching your criticism in between some praise, right? And this is an important thing that happens, just so you understand. And it's especially important for parents to understand, right? Because when we receive criticism, right, it inspires that fear in our brain, right? And as you know from listening to me, when we feel fear, generally speaking, that's the beginning of the stress response, right? And when we're feeling stress, we're shutting down, right? We're not learning things. We're not open to things. We're not creatively kind of operating there. We're reacting, we're surviving, right, when we're in that stress response, right? And so when you give somebody criticism like that, right, that's the result, right? And so generally speaking, people aren't going to learn at that point through that criticism, right? However, if you first tell someone, hey, like let's say, I'm criticizing myself for critiquing my webinar last night, right? You could say, like maybe, if I was talking to somebody else, obviously, I guess even when I'm talking to myself, I might say, hey, your energy was amazing. It was like, wow. Like, as usual, you showed up and it was great. That part was awesome. It was a little long, right? And a little this, a little that, right? Give a couple of points of criticism and then end with another positive thing, right? And what you've done there, right, is that or what I've done there is, or if you're doing this like with one of your kids or maybe somebody who you work with, who you supervise or something, right? Like when you offer that positive, right? That's like a drug for the brain, right? And in fact, there is a hormone that's released in your brain when you hear something good about yourself, and that hormone makes you feel good, right? And that is going to that's going to do the opposite of the fear, right? If you had any, stress, kind of starting up or low level stress happening in your body, when you heard that positive thing about yourself, for that moment, the stress got turned off, right? Because now you feel very safe. You feel somebody's praising you, somebody's telling you what you're doing right. So of course you're going to, you're going to relax for a minute, right? And then the idea is that whatever comes next, that criticism, right, you're ready to hear it because you're in this very positive place, right? So I would always do that after every webinar. I would go through and kind of go through what was good and also go through what was not good, like what I didn't feel was done well, and I mean it's all constructive and it's all loving and I'm fine with it all and stuff like that, and so last night, I would say. Yeah, I would say my energy was pretty good. I would say that, some of the topics in the webinar absolutely awesome. Went a little long, wasn't quite as smooth as as I'm used to being after doing it 58 times. You get pretty smooth at it. So there were definitely some things to improve, but there were also some good spots, right? But the thing that I want to talk about with this, and I want to kind of share with you and show you how I got lost. I got caught up in this thing and I abandoned my mindfulness a little bit. And I'm going to explain to you how that happens. And I think it's really important that you see this because even somebody who's been doing this work for years and literally I devote myself full time to this work. And even sometimes, I find myself like, wow, I just was not mindful at all about this thing, right? And so let me kind of walk you through what happened. First of all, I mean, it really starts some time ago when I was working with my own coach, right? My coach and I, we came up with this idea that this is what we're going to do, right? We're going to launch this program, right? The idea is that, I mean, this is a livelihood, right? So I gotta keep, kind of being creative and keep new sort of ideas coming through and new ways of helping people and generating that sort of, energy around my work, right? Because that energy is the thing that converts into what I use to pay my bills and stuff like that, right? So it's very important. However, right, and so anyway, so my coach and I, over the past couple of months, we've kind of designed this thing. Like, yeah, I'm going to really talk to people's anger because that's something that I've survived that, and I know the struggle, and I want to really help people who are in that place. All right, so that's what I'm going to do, right? And so what happens is like you kind of you create a model of something, right? And this happens to all of us, right? And this is something that used to happen to me a whole lot, but it's really interesting to see it happen now, and why I want to reflect to you, right? And there's a couple lessons in here that I want you to understand here, right? That you're hopefully going to really benefit from a couple of these lessons. So the idea then is that, I came up with this concept, right? That over a couple of months ago, right? My coach and I said, okay, we're going to do this, right? And once that became a thing, right? I became like it's almost like the focus on that thing became for me, there's no other way to be, right? Like this is what we said we're going to do, and this is what we're going to do, right? And I have to launch this program. I have to launch it when I said I'm going to launch it. I got to keep to the plan, right? And part of this plan also, and this was not necessarily something through my coach, it was sort of like a personal thing, right? I recently was talking to somebody about Google ads and like how, and this person is actually a therapist and not my therapist, just somebody I know. And he was saying that, that's how he gets 100% of his people. And he said something really beautiful about it. He says, what I do is I kind of develop an idea of the client that I can help, like my perfect client out there, right? And then I send them love notes through Google ads, right? And that just touched me. And I was like, I got to do that. I got to do Google ads because that's really beautiful. I love that concept of reaching out to those people who I can help, through their Google search. I mean, that's really beautiful to me. And so part of this whole project, the idea was to launch a webinar, get a whole bunch of people in the webinar. I mean, some of my webinars, I used to have like 50 people in there, just like it's like a big crowd, and so do a big webinar, and out of that, hopefully get, 5 or 10 people to take this, 12-week course that I was going to offer, and I have the course all designed, and I did the webinar, and I'm feeling real good about it. And then again, along the way, I'm sorry I digressed again, but along the way, I came up with this concept of the Google ads, right? After talking to this person I know. and thinking like, okay, I'm gonna try to run Google ads. Like I've heard all about them. I kind of, I see them all the time. Obviously, every time I search for something, I see Google ads, and so I get how they work and stuff. And I was like, I think I'm ready. I think I have enough of a clear message that I can, deliver out there, and that will, be a love note for that person for whom, it's like they're waiting for me out there, and so I ran some Google ads, right? And I spent some money. I invested. You could say invested. Um, I was working with a designer over in Pakistan who was celebrating their very big holiday called Eid, E-I-D. I'm not sure how they pronounce it. I'm very sorry if I don't mean to offend anybody. And so he wasn't available, to do the work, So I kind of put one together. I put together this like web page myself and put that out on Google. I probably screwed up a few of the settings for Google. I mean, it's the first time I've ever done it, and the response was just dismal. I mean, I really expected to have like, hundreds of people like signing up for this webinar because my concept is like, why not? It's a free webinar, and usually, I mean, most of us know by now that when you sign up for a free webinar and you don't attend the free webinar, 9 times out of 10 the person will send you a link to the recording. And so like why wouldn't you even if you watch just 2 minutes of it and see if it's something you're interested in, like why pass up something for free? I mean, that's the way my mind works, right? And so that's what I project out into the world. And so I had this expectation, right? And there's the first thing, right? That I had this expectation that I was going to get, like when I was doing this on the Eventbrite app, I was getting, 200-300 people a week, to sign up. Again, only like 50 would show up out of those 300. But that's okay because those are people now who are going to receive these emails every day with the videos and stuff, and it's just I'm helping them, and that's great. That's what I'm trying to do. That gets me going, right? Is to help people. And so when I only got like I think I got 11 people to sign up for this webinar, and it was like I was shocked, like why, how, why, like how, why? And then again, that's when you start thinking like, okay, well, what did I do wrong? Like I must have somehow messed up the Google, keyword searches and all this stuff that feeds into the algorithm. It must be on me, and that's why I only got 11 people. And so in the past, right, that would have started weighing on me, and it did this week. I mean, it was certainly something that was like, gee, I didn't mean to spend all that money just to get this result. Like, that was not the plan. That's not okay and stuff, But whatever, right? It's whatever, right? But in the past, this would have been a really big deal. And in the past, I may have even said, okay, I'm not doing the webinar, right? I might have just sent everybody an email saying, hey, due to whatever, I can't do this. I'll let you know when it happens again. I might have done something like that. But this time I was like, no, I'm going to keep pushing through, right? Because and sometimes that might sound like a good thing, right? To say, no, don't cancel, keep pushing, kind of persevere, tough it out, right? Pardon me, trying to stay ahead of this little allergy cough that I feel coming up. So in the past, like that might have been, or I'm sorry, when I say that, right? When I say no, I push through anyway. A lot of people might consider that, yeah, that's good. That's a badge of honor. Go for it. But it could also be said, and I'm not saying that it's good to flake out on things and cancel things. I mean, the people who did show up, I mean, I would have done the webinar anyway, because even if one person shows up to that webinar and I can help that one person, then that's worth it, but again, this idea of pushing through though became a thing that was about clinging. Right? It's about clinging to this idea like, no, this is what I planned with my coach months ago. This is what I put out to my my tribe, my community for the last few weeks. This is what I've worked so hard to put this webinar together. I am not going to abandon this. I have to do this, right? Like I must go through with this, right? And again, nothing wrong with that in and of itself. Right. But where is that coming from? Right. And in hindsight, I find that was coming from this place of clinging, this place of fear. Right. That I was not going to allow myself to, like I couldn't let go of this idea that I had of how this thing needed to work. Right. Which I know, like in my, I mean, I tell you all the time that it's not that things work out all kinds of ways, right? I'm the champion of that, right? Like I tell my clients that all the time, like let go of the expectation and just remember that things can work out in many different ways, and many of them are completely favorable to you. So you really you got to let things kind of unfold, right? You kind of allow life to happen, right? That's what I say all the time, right? But here I am, rigid, not letting it go. And I pushed and I pushed and I pushed. And I don't know if you remember, but last week when I was talking about the webinar, and this was one of the things that, again, before I knew how dismal the Google ads were and stuff like this, I was really excited about doing the webinar in a different kind of way, right? I was really excited about making it just sort of conversational, right? Like have a, have an interactive nature to it, right? And somewhere along the line, and again, every day when I look at the Google results, I see only one person signed up yesterday. Oh my gosh, all this money I'm spending, it tightens you up, right? And I fell victim to that, right? And instead of stepping back from it and really looking at the emotions that were happening to me, and allowing myself to disidentify and create some space in which I can, operate with this, instead of all that, I just dove into it. I was like, no, no, no. I got to try to save this. I actually, at one point, upped my budget on Google. Like, hey, maybe I'm just not spending enough money. Let me try this for a couple of days. That wasn't it, And so by the time I was actually putting together the webinar, I completely reverted back to my habitual automatic behavior, right? Just like I tell all of you that we have to watch for, right? I did the same thing, right? I got caught up in it. And so then I wound up so now at the time of the webinar, I had two people showed up onto the webinar. I thank you, but I think in the end it was like 5 or 6 people who joined, and I thank all of you for taking the time to do that. Like 3 people bailed out in the middle of it. Which that's a hard thing to do. I'll tell you that. I remember, like when you're giving your presentation and you see people, because you get this little sound from Zoom when somebody hangs up, and it's like this really like sort of like a boo, like kind of like a like negative sound, right? And it's really hard to just keep going when you see people just boo boo, and so yeah, so it wound up just like a little, like a couple of people joined late, but essentially I had 3 people on there and that's not the problem, right? It's not a problem that I only had 3 people there. The problem is that my expectation was that I would have 50 people there, right? And because of that expectation, and because of the tightness that expectation brought, right, I really didn't perform very well. I mean, I look back on on the actual delivery of the webinar, and it felt like the second one I ever did, right? And maybe even the first one I ever did. It was kind of awful. I was fumbling. I was not really conscious of the time. I just, all the things that I know how to do, right? I did very, very poorly yesterday. I failed. I mean, there's no question about it. I failed. I failed in the marketing of it. I failed in the execution of it. And technically, I think I failed in the conception of it, even, right? I think the idea itself. I mean, sure, there's some form of this idea that is probably good and would work, but the idea that I was kind of clinging to, yeah, it's probably not the right thing, and I probably needed to be more flexible about this whole situation, this whole process, right? I probably would have benefited from flexibility to allow myself to, to sort of read the reality of what is happening, right? Like not what I want to happen, not what I think should happen, not what I pray is going to happen, but what is happening. Right? Like I could have at any given time during the process, I could have stood there and paused for a moment and just, just paid attention to what is, right? As I'm telling you all the time, right? I mean, this is the thing, like everything that I'm telling myself here, I've told all of you over and over and over, right? And so, but the real thing though that I want to, and look, I mean, we all mess up, right? And that's the point, right? We all mess up, right? Even something that we've done, many, many times and developed. I mean, by the end of last year, I think, whenever it was that I stopped doing the webinars, I mean, I was so good at those webinars by that point. Like I could just, I didn't have to prepare. I just sat down, hit the button and just started going, and it was flawless, right? Because I'd done it 58 times in a row every 7 days, right? So you get skilled at something, right? And so the thing though that I really want you to hear here, right? The big lesson, and there's been lessons throughout, right? But the big lesson, right, is about the actual failure, right? And is about the, how we relate to failure. Okay, because this is really important, folks. Okay, really important. Okay, again, I mean, I will stand up and admit it. Like, I basically fell on my face yesterday, right? I rushed through it. I was just, basically like blah 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 blah. No interaction, no pausing, no, even the meditation that I did in the middle, it was lame. It was terrible. It was probably the worst meditation I've done perhaps ever. Like it just really, I feel a little bit of guilt and shame that of the people who attended. Like I did not give them, like if they had paid me for this, I would return their money today, right? Like that's how I felt about my performance. Now they might perceive it differently, right? And that's always potential, right? That they might have said, no, I thought it was great, I got a lot of benefit. And it's very possible that despite my poor performance, they still got a lot of benefit out of it, right? So it's not like it was not worth doing, right? But I didn't do it well, right? Now, again, in the past, right, this would be such a different situation, right? In the past, I wouldn't be doing this podcast today. I would be upstairs, under my covers, sobbing and canceling all my appointments today and, going getting a big tub of ice cream and watching TV all day or something like that. Like, I would have been very upset, right, because of what happened, right? I would have felt like a failure, I would have felt like, like this came up in our meeting the other day with my group, this learning to surf group that I do every Saturday, that we talked about, like I am not a bad singer. I'm just a person who sings badly, right? And there's a difference there. Right. And that's the key difference. Right. In the past, I would have allowed the culmination of the last few weeks to arrive and say, I'm just bad at this and I can't do this. Like I'm a failure. I suck. Right. And it really might have even led me to make some very, very dramatic or impactful, decisions about the course of my career. I mean, that absolutely could happen. I might have looked for jobs, like it could have really gotten to that place. Right. And it, like for most people, I mean, that's a normal reaction, right? Because we feel like we put so much of ourselves into this thing. So we feel like it is us, right? It is me. It's my ideas. It's my creation. It's part of me. And therefore, when that thing fails, I feel like I'm a failure, right? But the thing is that when we consider ourselves a failure, similar to what I was saying about the criticism before, right? Like the minute that we feel as though we are not good enough, that we have, somehow, screwed everything up, right? And it's our fault, right? Well, in that place, right, what happens to our brain at that time when we start feeling that way, what happens to our brain is that it loses a lot of the things that are, it loses the power to learn from the experience. It loses, just like giving somebody harsh criticism without, prefacing it with something positive. What you're doing is you're talking to somebody whose brain is shut down, right? And so as I'm going through this, my brain's gonna be shut down. I'm not gonna see any sort of potential, positive sort of angle on this. I'm not gonna see anything that I can take from this and grow and learn from it. I'm gonna instead, just stay in a funk about it, right? And probably never do a webinar again and probably feel like I'm a terrible coach because of this. I can't help people. I can't do this, right? None of that is true, of course, right? But that's how I would feel based on that the shame that would come from the feeling of failure, right? And that's what's really important here, right? Because I have disidentified, Okay. It wasn't part of me. It was, again, it's not that I'm a bad webinar host. It's that I hosted badly last night, right? I just didn't do a great execution last night, right? It was a flub. It was a brick. It was a whatever. It was bad, right? It was a bummer of a night, right? But because I'm not identifying with it, it allows me to pick through it the way I am now. Right. And I'm doing this publicly with you, but this is basically the thought process that I went through last night after this. Right. And in that thought process, right, because I'm disidentified with it, because I'm not feeling the shame and the guilt and the heaviness of this, right, I'm also able to see, where I went wrong. I can see, like, okay, yeah, I was clinging to this too much. I had blinders on. I could have stopped. When the designer wasn't there, I could have said, okay, I'm going to push this back a couple of weeks, right? Like, there's so many decisions I could have made, but I can see those decisions now from this place of disidentification. If I was identified with it and thinking that it's a mark on my, on my integrity here, well, then I can't do any of this. And then all of these valuable lessons, this valuable information is just lost to me, right? And I'll never, ever, ever get it back. And so I sit here today thinking about how often this happened in the past, right? How often I went through things and being so identified with it and being so wrapped up in the result and the expectations and the outcomes and the failure and the shame and all that stuff, being wrapped up in all of that, how many opportunities did I have to learn about myself, about my work, about life? Like, how many opportunities did I have that just passed, and I'll never ever get those opportunities back again. I don't care how many hours I'm going to journal. I don't care how many hours I'm going to meditate. I don't care how many times I'm going to talk to people. There are things that will never ever ever arise for me again, right? And they might have been some valuable lessons back then. Right. And so the lesson here, the big takeaway here is that, a couple of little takeaways first is to remember to be flexible, right? And to remember to check yourself and see if you're being too rigid and too clingy to some specific expectation or outcome, right? That's the first lesson. And that's a pretty big one. It's not a little lesson, but an even bigger lesson, right, and a really important lesson is, as I was just saying, the idea to allow ourselves to disidentify with it so that we can look at it, realistic, and we can learn from it. And one of the best ways to do this, right, is to change your relationship to failure, right? Like failure is not, and I say this a lot, right? Failure is not the end of something. Failure is the middle of something. Right? Failure is a way for you to learn, right? Failure is an actual positive thing for you. And if we can look at it that way, if I can change my relationship to failure from one of fear to one of love, well, then in the face of failure, I'm going to remain in my creative and sort of optimized state of mind, right? I'm not going to get into that funk and lose even more of my momentum, lose even more of my, understanding of who I am and what I do and all that stuff, right? So I hope this helped you. I hope it helped you to watch me kind of critique myself and go through this process of seeing where I screwed up this week and these last couple of weeks and things that I could have done differently. But again, the only way we can say that, like, hey, I screwed up and I got to do something differently so I can learn from this, the only way we can do that is we're not identified with the failure. So again, consider the bottom line here is that when we fail, failure is part of being human, right? There's no human being alive who has lived a life without failure, right? None, zero, never, right? And so understanding that failure is simply part of this thing that we do as we live this life, right? Come to love it. Love failure, admire failure, be fond of failure, welcome failure, because failure is where you learn, right? And so if you can do that, it changes everything. And this, of course, ties into the self-compassion, right? Which, as you know, is one of my favorite practices and topics. All right. So if you have any questions about this, I'm more than happy to jump on a call and talk about it. Okay. Because this is important stuff, right? I'm really happy that this, and again, it would be very easy to say, oh, it was a waste of time. It was terrible. It was, I put so much into this, so much time, so much money, so much energy, and I got nothing out of it. It'd be very easy for me to sit here and say those things. But if I look at it openly without that identification, I can see that actually me going through that, the whole thing, has actually provided a wonderful lesson for you. And so that's what I do every day anyway. So it's actually a really, really wonderful thing that came about, right? Even if it cost me $100, it's still a wonderful thing that happened because I just got to teach you something. Maybe something in what I said today could change the trajectory of your life. And for that, I'm so happy that I failed. Like, this is amazing that I failed. I thank you for failure. It's wonderful. Let me know if I can help you to learn to love your failure and your anger and your shame and all of it. All right, everybody, have a great day. I'll be back in tomorrow with what I was going to talk about today, which is about the recovery process from anger and stress. Okay, and I'm going to get into that tomorrow. All right, everybody, wish you well. I'll be back again tomorrow. Take care. Bye-bye.